Okay. Yeah, so they're celebrating, I guess, and, they're having to sit there and watch what they're doing. Um, yeah, and she talked about, so they'd taken a lot of cattle and all horses and whatever, and then they were, I guess, gonna eat them. So some were roasting, some lying and burning, and some boiling to feed our merciless enemies who were joyful enough, though we were disconsolate. So anyway, she really talks about a lot, and it's kind of interesting to see how it changes. But she over and over again refers to them as heathens and just all different kinds of really negative words, and that's which I mean I can understand. If I'd seen my family and friends slaughtered by them, I would feel that way as well. But she kind of changes her tune a little bit the more time that she spends with them, and so that's I think is pretty interesting how her perception of them does kind of change. Okay, who said second remove? Did y'all have that one too? Okay, go ahead.
Well, she talks about when it's the next morning and they're traveling and stuff. And she's miserable, but she looks to God and says how she's with her or with them.
Okay. Yeah, that one was kind of short, but she is carrying her child during this. I think she was another child, but she was 6, and so I mean I can't even imagine. And I think it says in here somewhere about how many miles they would often travel. And I mean, it was like maybe 7, 8, 10 miles or something in a day. And I mean, she's walking, and remember, she's been shot, and so in the arm, and eventually that I think she gets an infection in it. But can you imagine? She's been shot, and she's had all this, trauma, mental trauma, and plus her dying child, and she's having to carry a 6 pound or 6-year-old kid, on top of, and then walking. I mean, it's really pretty amazing to me that this woman survived this. Okay, but she does always refer back to keeping her eyes on God. She says, and having no Christian friend near me, either to come. Oh, may I see the wonderful power of God, that my spirit did not utterly sink under my affliction. Still the Lord upheld me with his gracious and merciful spirit, and we were both alive to see the light of the next morning. So it's really, my faith is amazing. All right, who had the third removed? Okay.
Okay. So, she's traveling with her sick child, and her child's getting worse.
Yeah.
And they go to sleep one day, and then her child dies.
Yeah.
That little kid dies. She wakes up, and then she's like, "Look, y'all, my kid's dead." And then like, okay, you can keep going, and they just like kind of left the kid. Like they left some with him, so she probably thought that they were doing something. I don't know if they did.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she left her dead kid. And then she went to go see some of her other kids. She saw her daughter, her 10-year-old daughter, and her daughter like dropped down to her feet when she saw her and was crying.
And it provoked them, didn't it?
Yeah.
It didn't. The Native American one I forget. Anyway, the Native American that had Native Americans were provoked by that, and they didn't like seeing the little girl just weeping or whatever. I don't know. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and then she sees her son too. That's, I think that's what that says. I didn't get much farther.
Okay, well you had quite a lot. Yeah. So her daughter dies, and it is very. Let's see. 9 days I sat upon my knees with my babe in my lap, till my flesh was raw again, my child being ready to depart the sorrowful world. They bade me carry it to another wigwam. Whether I went with a very heavy heart, and I sat down with a picture of my death on my lap. So she knew the little girl was about to die. About 2 hours in the night, my sweet babe, like a lamb, departed this life. It being 6 years old, it was 9 days. She lived for 9 days. But even at that, I have thought since of the wonderful goodness of God to me in preserving me in the use of my reason and senses in that distressed time, that I did not use wicked and violent means in my own miserable life. In the morning, when they understood that my child was dead, they sent for me home to my master's wigwam, who was married to King Philip's sister. I went to take up my dead child in my arms to carry it with me, but they bid me let it alone. There was no resisting, but go I must and leave it. When I had been at my master's wigwam, I took the first opportunity to go and look after my dead child. When I came, I asked them where she was, and they told me it was upon the hill. Then they went and showed me where it was, and she saw that the ground was newly digged. And there they told me they had buried it, so she didn't get to see having kind of, service, or well, even like graveside or anything, for her daughter. They just took her and buried her without her even knowing it. So anyway, that was very sad. And so she does get to see, like Justin said, 2 of her children, that had been taken captive, and they were with other bands of these Native Americans. This is kind of interesting, though, I think. Though I'm reading kind of halfway through, those that were with us at home were gathered together as soon as they heard the whooping, and every time that the other went over their number, these at home gave a shout. And thus they continued till those that had been upon the expedition were come up to the Sagamore's wigwam. And then, oh, the hideous insulting and triumphing that there was over some Englishmen's scalps that they had taken and brought with them. I cannot but take notice of the wonderful mercy of God to me in those afflictions in sending me a Bible. One of the Indians that came from Medfield Bight, had brought some plunder, came to me and asked me if I would have a Bible. He had got one in his basket. I was glad of it and asked him whether he thought the Indians would let me read. He answered yes. So I took the Bible, and in that melancholy time, it came to my mind to read, anyway, some scripture. But that's, I think, very interesting that evidently in one of their raids, they had gotten a Bible, taken a Bible from someone's home, but one of the Indians offered it to her and asked her if she wanted the Bible, so she took that. Anyway, okay, who had the 12th removed? Okay.
To me, it was kind of confusing.
Okay.
I got that it sounded like she was like a slave.
She was what?
It sounded like she was like a slave or like a servant for people.
Yeah.
And these people, like, they wouldn't let her read the Bible or anything, like anything like that. And it sounds like she got kicked out, or like her master.
Yeah.
Someone left and she had to go find somewhere to stay.
Yeah.
And she didn't really have anywhere to go. But like she always like kept her faith in God. And like
Yeah.
always trusted. And that's what I like.
Okay. Yeah, it was on a Sunday morning, a Sabbath morning. They prepared for their travel this morning. I asked my master whether he would sell me to my husband, and he answered mux, which did much rejoice my spirit. My mistress, before we went, was going to the burial of a papoose, and returning, she found me sitting and reading my Bible. She snatched it hastily out of my hand and threw it out. She tried to catch it, and never let her, and so she did get it back. She just was careful then to not let anyone see her reading her Bible or see the Bible out. So, at some point she gets kicked out of her wigwam or her master's wigwam. And to be honest, I don't remember if this is the same one or not, but I do know that one of her masters at some point, she actually got pretty close to.
Yeah, she
Um,
said it was like her best friend.
Yeah, was that in this part? 'Cause I couldn't remember if there was another master, or she got sent to somebody else or what. But his wives, I think he had like 3 wives, and they got kind of jealous of her because he was actually pretty good to her, and I think brought her. I don't remember if it's this part or another part, but the weather got bad, and he had her, come in. I don't know. But he treated her pretty nicely, so they got pretty close. And the others got jealous. Okay, good. Who had part of the 20th removed? Or did I skip one? Oh, I did, didn't I? I'm looking at an old one. Oh, yes, 11th and 12th. Who had that part? 11th and 12th? Anybody? No,
They
first.
had 12.
Oh, wait, we have the 11th one.
Oh, okay, all right, I see what I did. So, yeah, that was kind of pretty much more the same. That one was really short, so. Okay, who had the 20th removed, the first part? You guys, okay.
What do you mean the first part?
They had the first one.
Oh, okay, David?
Basically, from what I got as far as I went,
Mhm.
she moved around again, and she started hearing about like maybe seeing her sister and her husband, and begged that they would let her,
Mhm.
and they didn't want to. But after how many days, an Englishman came on a horse, and they killed the horse and kept the Englishman. Let her see him, and I think that was her husband. I'm not sure.
Okay,
Other than that, I didn't hear a whole lot.
yeah,
It was a lot
well,
of going back and forth between the same thing, so I'm not sure.
it's kind of hard to follow a lot of it because, she does use some different words, and I mean, she wasn't a writer, either, and it's not particularly well written, but of course she was recalling this after, almost 12 weeks with them, and then, went back and was writing all this down, but, from memory. Yeah, so here's a little bit about the Englishman. They let him come to their wigwam. I begged of them to let me see the Englishman, but they would not. But there I was, fain to sit their pleasure. When they had talked their fill with him, they suffered me to go to him, so they let her see him. And she asked about her husband and her friends. He told me they were all well and would be glad to see me. Her husband sent her a pound of tobacco, which I sold for 9 shillings in money. And anyway, so he sent her some things that she could kind of trade with them. And they would not let her go with this man. And so anyway, I don't want to go on with that. But anyway, she did at least get to talk to this Englishman, and she did find out that her family, her husband and all, and the others that had survived or that weren't there and had lived, that they were all okay. So that was some good news to her, I guess. Okay, who had the next part? All right.
I think she talks about, even though the natives, when they were winning, they always like had hope and faith in God.
Mm-hmm.
Also her returning back to home, seeing her kids,
Yeah.
the ones that were still alive.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of got from this.
Yeah, she eventually, her husband, I believe, pays a ransom for her. So pays them some money some way or another. And they let her go back. She's returned to her family. But she does throughout, yeah, and some of the other family too. I'm looking at this one part. My sister's son was redeemed for £4, which the council gave order for the payment of, having now received one of our children. He hastened toward the other. Going back through Newberry, my husband preached there on the Sabbath day, for which they rewarded him manyfold. So anyway, some of the family members were returned that had been taken. Mostly they were the children, and I think a couple of teenagers or something. But anyway, so she does return to her home, and she ends this talking about her faith that we must rely on God himself and our whole dependence must be upon him. If trouble from smaller matters begin to arise in me, I have something at hand to check myself with and say, why am I troubled? It was but the other day that if I had had the world, I would have given it for my freedom. And she kind of goes on and on. I have learned to look beyond present and smaller troubles to be quieted under them, as Moses said, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. And then she says, finished, which I guess means finished. So anyway, I think that one of the things that to me really stands out with this is that she does, throughout, even when her little girl dies, she never loses her faith, and she, on and on, she is always thankful and, prayerful, and so, that's probably what kept her alive. That, and evidently she was kind of a hardy woman, and being able to go through all that. She was with them for almost 12 weeks, so 3 months. That's had to have been some kind of tough. But as soon as she got back with her family and got home, she immediately started writing this. And I don't know if I already mentioned this or talked about this with you guys, but remember the women, first of all, Puritans were never to read for enjoyment, but and she is the first account of what's called a captive narrative. And so it was okay for the Puritans to read a captive narrative. That's one thing that they then could read. And of course, they loved it because they were full of drama. And so she was the first person to write a captive narrative. And John Winthrop, and then another very prominent Puritan, Increase Mathers, both John Winthrop wrote like the foreword to her book, and then Increase Mathers wrote something at the end about how, remarkable she was and how she always kept her faith in God and everything. So because there were 2 Puritan men that wrote a foreword and then something at the end, it was okay then as a woman for her to write this and to have it published. So it was kind of like the 2 Puritan men had to give their stamp of approval in order for her to be able to have this published. And she wasn't doing it for fame or money or anything like that. She just wanted to give an account of what happened to her. And this was very widely read, and it was published. It was widely read and very popular in England and in the colonies. And I don't know if she made much money on it, but that, again, wasn't really her purpose. She was not a writer, but she just wanted to get out there what happened to her. But anyway, so this sparked interest in the captive narratives, and that became a popular genre. And actually, even one of the early American romantics, James Fenimore Cooper, he wrote a series of captive narratives. And actually, there's a movie that's made over one of them, Last of the Mohicans, if you've ever seen that. Have any of y'all seen that? That movie came out, it's really good. It came out probably about 25 years or so ago. It's Daniel Day-Lewis in his heyday. And I forget the actress's name. But anyway, it's really good. It is based on one of his, he had a series, and it was based on this one, and I can't think of his name, Natty Bumpard or something like that. I can't remember now. But anyway, and he was, which is the role that Daniel Day-Lewis plays. And so this is an Englishman, well, he's grown at this point when these stories take place. He's a protagonist, but he, some way or another, he had, as a young boy, there was a raid on his family's home, and he was taken by this, I think it's a made-up tribe, that's what my husband said. And this is in like what's now upstate New York. And so this tribe of Indians took him, and then as a little boy, and raised him as one of their own. But he is white, he's English. And so as a grown man, he knows, and is friends with a lot of the Native Americans, but he also, and so then a lot of these books take place during the French and British, what's that called, the English, Yes, the French and Indian War, that's it. And so he really sides with the Native Americans, but he tries to negotiate anyway. It's really a good movie though. So that is then the captive narratives, and they were pretty popular. And so Anyway, all right, any, questions or anything to add about Mary here, Mary Rowlandson? All right, probably, I'm kind of thinking now, since we got finished with this, that we'll probably have our test. We may just go ahead and have it on Wednesday. I gotta look it up for one thing. So we'll probably just have it on Wednesday, but it will cover everything. It'll be a pretty large test. It'll cover everything from the beginning of the semester. So, John Smith, John Winthrop, Ian Bradstreet, Edward Taylor, and Mary Rowlandson. Did I miss anyone? And then just, the Puritans and Puritan poetry and the colonies and anything. If you've missed any days, you might want to go and check out the lectures